Teachers, what's the worst thing a kid brought for show and tell? Only been teaching 1 year but so far, mom's only set of car keys. Edit, thanks for the awards. We did call mom immediately but unfortunately she was stuck at home all day until little one got home with the keys. In 5th grade, we were studying human anatomy. When we got to the eyes, a kid brought in a bag full of cow's eyes. His dad worked in a slaughterhouse. Teacher was horrified. Edit, I should add that my classmate brought them in, unannounced. The teacher had no plans for dissection, was going to show us a film strip about eyes or something. Wasn't show and tell but once during morning break while I was a student teacher, 2 6-year-olds came to find the class teacher in the staff room. They had something to show her. She came back with pictures. These boys had found half a dead and decomposed hedgehog and decided to pick it up and put it on her desk. Needless to say hands were thoroughly washed and drenched in sanitizer. I brought 2 knives. My dad is from a region in France where they make famous knives, La Guiole, and I owned 2 of them, one made of horn and one was bright orange. It didn't cross my mind it could be a problem, but they called my parents, who weren't mad at me. The teacher across the hall from me had a student who brought what he thought was a lucky rabbit foot to show to the class and excitedly announced he had enough for everyone in the class. The rabbit foot was a tampon. My brother found a scorpion at our house and captured it to bring for show and tell. The scorpion got out somehow and the teacher had everyone on high alert to look for it and capture it. Several children returned to the teacher having found the scorpion. That was the day we found out our school was infested with scorpions. Edit, for everyone asking, this was when we lived in Alabama. A dead frog that had been converted into a coin purse. I knew a dude who was a teacher of primary school-aged kids. They had a sink in their classroom that became clogged. I wonder what could be blocking the drain, he said out loud. Bags of drugs, blurted out one of the kids. Turns out the girl's dad was a dealer who would hide bags of drugs in the drains under the sinks in their house. Someone brought their pet bird dead, in a box, that was going to be buried when they got home later that day. In my school some kid brought in his collection of laundry rocks which were crumpled up pieces of paper that he put in his pockets and when his mom did the laundry they would turn hard like rocks. He said he did it by accident once, liked it, and started deliberately putting crumpled paper in his pockets to make more. 1993, grade 3 primary school in Australia. My show and tell was rotten egg gas. I had a classmate hold a test tube that contained sulfur power while I added hydrochloric acid, no protective gear used. None of the adults saw any issue with this. My best friend in grade school brought a huge hunting knife one day. He missed a week of school and my parents didn't let me hang out with him anymore after that. He ended up becoming an ump in MLB and always gave out tickets to his buddies. Thanks mom and dad. I like free tickets too. Edit, stop asking who it is. I'm not doxing my old friend from grade 4 who kept his shit together. I taught 5th grade in a school with really rich kids and really low-income kids bust in. One of the low-income kids brought a coconut for her show and tell about Trinidad, where her dad was from. She cracked it open, it was completely rotten inside and smelled awful. I was so worried about the kid being embarrassed, but then one of the rich kids, who was also of a pretty low intellect, looked at it with wide eyes and said it's like the earth, the core, the mantle, and the crust, which is something I think he had never really understood before. So it actually turned out pretty well. I had a student bring in her grandfather's skull. The class was horrified. It turned out that he was a doctor and it was the skull that he kept in his office as a model. Not a teacher but one of the kids in my class brought a remote control helicopter to class and flew it around. It was super cool until he accidentally got the blades wrapped around a girl's hair. I think the nurse spent an hour getting it out. In the 3rd grade, a girl brought her mom's kidney stones in a pill bottle. Not a teacher but there was a girl in my brother's year whose dad owned a junk/salvage place. Girl brings in an old thermometer. Okay cool, whatever. She then goes and then this is the most fun part and proceeds to smash the thermometer on the desk and play with the mercury. I don't know how that got resolved but I do know that by the time I got to 1st grade, we no longer had show and tell. My wife is a teacher in a major US city. One of her grade 4 students brought in a packet of his mom's cocaine to show the class during Drug Awareness Week. He got some visits from the principals and school counselor, maybe the men in blue. When I was in 6th grade I took a belly dancing bralette thing in that my brother sent me from his deployment. We were studying the Middle East and I had something from there. I thought it was cool. I remember my teacher gulping, eyes bulging, asking, just that? That's all they wear? And me saying, yeah, I guess so. Anyways, it turns out he sent me his girlfriend's present and his girlfriend got my camel book. But I was very, very popular with the 6th grade boys for a little while. I'm not a teacher, but did bring a black widow spider once. I caught it in my backyard. My teacher kindly explained that it was not okay to bring venomous spiders to school, confiscated, and released it. Went to school in a tiny town within eastern Colorado. Kid in my class drove his dad's combine to school for show and tell. Was in the 4th grade. Still find it crazy that nobody really cared that there was this big ass piece of farm equipment sitting on the front lawn all day. Not a teacher, but when my son was in preschool, he brought me in for show and tell a couple of months after brain surgery. I had a shaved head, gnarly scar, and a crazy eye. He made sure I showed everyone up close my crazy eye rolling on the floor laughing. It was funny to me and made me happy. He had a hard time seeing me like that in the beginning. Not a teacher, but when I was in 3rd grade this dumb kid in my class decided to bring a live bat to class. The only problem, he put the bat in a plastic bag in his book bag and the bat died because it couldn't breathe. Him removing it from the plastic bag dead. I still remember almost 26 years later. When I was in 5th grade and going to school in AZ, this girl in our class brought in a glass jar with a tarantula and a black widow, no clue how she caught both in one day, or why. Within an hour the tarantula was dead and upside down in the jar. Same day there was a fire drill and yep, someone knocked it off her desk and the jar broke, releasing the black widow. We never found it, but the teacher made sure to stomp the dead tarantula just in case. Same thing happened with our glass fire ant farm in 2nd grade, now that I think about it. I don't know why people kept bringing this shit into school, or why our teachers let them. A lamb's tail. Apparently they went to a farm which let visitors keep them as souvenirs. Who knew that removing tails was a thing? Turns out it was a mistake to postpone show and tell for a couple of days while, hidden in a locker, the tail marinated in the July heat. Asked my students to bring an object they loved. One kid brought his grandmother. Glass he brought from home. He did in fact cut himself, which is how I discovered the glass when he walked up to me with bloody hands. Had a kid aged 6 to 7 who had a lot going on, but part of it was that he was a compulsive liar with absolutely no sense of when a lie was so poorly constructed that everyone would know. Every single day he would say he had something for show and tell. Most days we didn't have time for his show and tell, but every so often we kind of had to let him have a go. He'd stand up, ready to do his show and tell, then wander over to my desk, browse for a minute, pick up the most random crap, a post-it note, a sharpener, once it was the custom well-done stamp that actually had my name on it, and then say some poorly constructed story about how he found it in Africa when he went there for tea yesterday with his auntie or some such. He'd get really upset if he realized nobody believed him, though even at that age, most of the kids had the tact, or ability, to just smile and nod. I had a relative who was a biology professor at the college and they let me take an actual human brain to show and tell. I was a legend after. When I was a newborn baby my sister convinced my mom to bring me to her 3rd grade show and tell and I barfed all over her. Not a teacher but my sister brought her pet cow. We lived on a dairy farm, once for show and tell when we were younger. I was the student. I brought the kidneys, still warm, from a hog that my father had butchered that morning. He just wrapped them in plastic wrap and dropped them off for me. Veins still attached, the whole thing. In hindsight, it was gruesome. When I was in prep, so about 5, I bought in a skeleton my dad used for study. It was a real skeleton. Back in the 60s/70s when he was studying medicine, you could just buy a skeleton. He used it to learn the bones of the human body. Thing is, my dad must have bought it in because it was in a big box and I couldn't have done it myself. Not a teacher, but a kid brought a super ball that he proceeded to bounce as hard as he could and broke a ceiling tile. I'm a preschool teacher in a state with legal weed. One of my students brought in a plastic tube the local dispensary uses for pre-oral joints. He said he found it in his parents' room and he brought it because he liked the popping sound it made when he opened it. In the 6th grade, a girl brought a baby alligator to class. She lived about 2 blocks from the school. Her and her older brother had found it in a canal that ran behind the school playground. Yes, this was Florida. His haircut. He comes into my studio, I just got a haircut, then vigorously rubs and shakes his head as millions of fine hair bits rain down all over. Not a teacher, but when I was in 5th grade my friend brought a metal hip replacement piece from a human body. A human body that her father had cremated and kept. It was for a what would you like to be when you grow up, sort of show and tell. She wanted to be a mortician like her dad. What's worse is that she allowed for this piece to be passed around the class before telling everyone, including the teacher, what it was. Chaos ensued afterwards. Not a teacher, but I did this one. I brought a switchblade comb. Pulled it out and opened it. Teacher panicked and almost passed out and started hyperventilating. I ran into her in my young adult life and she still remembered because it actually put her into labor. This was 3rd grade, about 1987 to 88. I taught for a few years and a kid brought in a death note he had made, full of names and the way they would die. If you are not familiar with the series, check out the manga/anime synopsis. The student had my name in the death note, too.